To London now for a catch-up on the European situation and a nasty surprise overnight. Spain has nationalised its largest regional bank, Bankia, which has put its hand out for a €4.5 billion bailout from its government. And Greece's drama continues, with talks to form a new government there by the left coalition failing. And more woes, the Eurozone has withheld €1 billion of its next bailout tranche to Greece this morning, Athens time. Well, joining me now is David Buik from BGC Partners. David, good morning to you there.
Good evening to you, Tiki.
Let's go to Spain first, and this nationalisation of Bankia. How worrying is that? I mean, I'm thinking about Ireland and how the bank slowly got worse and worse. Are we going to see a real crisis in banking coming our way?
Potentially, what we've seen in the past in terms of banking crisis could be a vicarage tea party in comparison to what's going on in Spain. Bank loans represent 170% of Spanish GDP. There are far too many what they call cajas. My apologies for my wretched pronunciation. The Spanish savings banks, who are completely, utterly and irrevocably wedded to the property market. And the property market is absolutely massive. And it looks like if you go down the east coast of Spain now, I've never seen so many unlived-in properties, blocks of flats, not the slightest possibility of them being sold. Now, not only has Bankia been announced to have a capital injection of €4.5 billion from the government, but we think that the banking sector, just to get the ball rolling, is going to require an injection of another €30 billion worth of capital. And I'm hoping that Premier Rajoy will actually force, not ask, the very large number of small caja banks to merge sooner rather than later. Because whether we like it or not, Tiki, big is beautiful. And this has a very nasty possibility of becoming uncontrollable.
Well, indeed, because I would have thought the sensitivity here to Greece actually going into default would be huge, because you've now got in Greece the problem with the government, but also Germany threatening to block more international aid. So if there is a default, presumably that would have a very big impact on Spain.
Well, it could do, but the one thing that Spain's got for it is that if we just compare the 10-year yields on Spanish bonds against Greek bonds, now the Spanish 10-year yield has just breached through 6% yesterday, which is where it was about a month ago. Greece, despite having had a bailout of, I think it was €11 billion to pay its bills, has seen yields go shooting up to 33%. Now, that is not in the same planet that I live in.
Well, David, what does that mean when you have a...
The cost of borrowing,
yeah.
The cost of borrowing, Tiki, for 10 years to the Greek taxpayer is 33%. So long as night follows day, they cannot possibly sustain a level of interest rates in that way. How do you get it down? You get it down by selling your assets, which the Greeks absolutely refuse to do. You also attempt to raise your game in terms of growth. Now, if you compare labour costs, which is the big problem with Greece, is A, nobody pays any tax, and secondly, the fact remains is that they've got far too many people working in the public sector. In the last 5 years, I think labour costs have gone up 24%. In Germany, they've hardly moved at all. If there is no will to get their act together, we have a serious problem on our plate, and I think the European Union should crystallise it. It isn't possible. Give Greece 2 years' notice to leave the Eurozone, then the drachma would come in, it would be devalued by 30%, and they've got a chance of recovery. Where we are now, we're all just going to pick up the tab for it.
I was going to say, Europe seems now paralysed by this new argument about growth.
Well, the trouble is with growth is that it's platitudes. That unless you're a country like China or Australia who've got natural resources and, you know, people wanting to buy things all the time and a really strong internal growth, the only thing you're going to do is to create growth, is to do it by way of exporting and manufacturing. And that is all down to one thing, confidence, Tiki. There is no confidence in the European Union whatsoever. It's at an all-time low, apart from Germany and a little bit of France. And the trouble is, it's like the plague. It goes right through everything. So everybody sits on their hands or tucks them under their armpits and their pockets are on the floor and they've not got a chance of meeting.
And yet
People spend money because they feel good about life.
In all this, Germany seems to have avoided a double-dip recession.
Just.
Yes.
But I doubt Angela Merkel going into an election next year would have dreamt in a million years that Germany, having been so buoyant and responsible for so many of the export items going out to China, to the United States and to other parts of Europe, would have seen a threat of even down to 1% growth in 2012.
Yep.
And the problem is it's beyond her control, because if the rest of Europe is hanging in rags, and if the Far East, where we've seen signs of China dropping a little bit, it makes it very difficult to maintain the same momentum.
Briefly, I have to ask you about your favourite company, News Corp. It seems the results are no longer about print.
Well, you know the way I feel about that. I thought the personal attacks and the way it's done completely out of proportion. News Corp, like it or not, is a sensational company. The fact that they're giving back $10 billion to the shareholders because they've got more capital than they actually need just goes to show you how incredibly robust it is. Well done on the film industry and television, and let's hope News Corp cracks on.
Good on you, David Buik. Thank you very much for joining us there, sir.
Pleasure.